I've always lived alone and never really thought much of it. My neighborhood is quiet and pretty safe, or so I thought. This happened a few months ago, and honestly, it's still messing with my head. It was a Friday night, and I had just gotten home from a long day at work. All I wanted to do was relax, maybe watch some Netflix and just chill. The weather was pretty bad. Lots of rain and thunder, the kind of night where you just want to stay inside. My house is kind of isolated, which usually I love. But this night it made everything worse. I remember the power went out around 9 p.m. I was a bit annoyed because I had just started watching a movie. I figured it was the storm and that the power would come back soon, so I lit some candles and decided to read a book instead. It was kind of cozy at first. But then I heard it, a faint sound that I couldn't quite place. I brushed it off as the house settling or the wind. You know how it is. But then it happened again, louder this time. It sounded like it was coming from outside the front door. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to stay rational. Maybe a branch had fallen or something. I went to the front door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness and rain. I stood there for a minute listening, but heard nothing else. I decided to double-check the locks, just in case. Then I went back to my book. After about 20 minutes, I heard a noise from the kitchen. It sounded like a soft thud, like something had fallen. My heart started racing, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, I went to check. I walked into the kitchen, and everything seemed normal. I stood there for a bit, just listening, but there was nothing but the sound of rain. I went back to the living room, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. I sat back down, trying to focus on my book, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I heard it again, a soft, almost imperceptible scraping noise. This time it was coming from the back of the house. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight, and headed toward the noise. I walked down the hallway, and as I got closer to the back door, the noise stopped. I shined the light around, but there was nothing there. I checked the back door. It was locked. I checked the windows in the back of the house. They were all secure. I felt a bit silly for getting so worked up, but I couldn't deny that something felt off. I went back to the living room and decided to call a friend just to chat and maybe calm my nerves. I told her what was going on, and she laughed, saying it was probably just the storm. Talking to her made me feel better, and after a while I felt a bit more relaxed. Just as I was about to hang up, I heard it again. This time, it was a loud bang from upstairs. My friend asked what the noise was, and I told her I had to go check it out. I hung up and grabbed a kitchen knife just in case. My heart was pounding as I crept up the stairs, the flashlight in one hand, the knife in the other. At the top of the stairs, I listened carefully. The noise had come from the guest bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see a flicker of candlelight from inside. I pushed the door open slowly, the knife held out in front of me. The room was empty, but the window was wide open. Rain was pouring in, soaking the carpet. I was certain I had locked that window. My mind raced with possibilities. Had someone been in the house with me this whole time? Had they escaped through the window? I slammed the window shut and locked it, then checked the closet and under the bed. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I went back downstairs, double-checking every lock and window. I even checked the basement, which I hated going into because it always creeped me out. I decided to stay up for the rest of the night, knife in hand, just in case. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in my house, that they could still be here. I sat in the living room, every little noise making me jump. The power finally came back on around 3 a.m., but I was too scared to feel relieved. When the sun finally came up, I went outside to look around. I found muddy footprints leading from the woods behind my house to the back door. They were large, definitely not mine. My heart sank as I realized someone had been watching me, maybe even tried to get in. I called the police, but they didn't find much. They said it was probably a transient or someone looking for shelter from the storm. I never really felt safe in that house again. I ended up moving a few months later. It was a Wednesday night, and I was home alone. My roommate had gone out of town for a conference, so it was just me in our small apartment. The weather was pretty mild, no storms or anything unusual. I had just finished dinner and decided to settle in with a new book. Around 10 p.m., I heard what sounded like the front door opening. My heart skipped a beat. I was sure I had locked it after getting home from work. I stayed still for a moment, straining to hear any other sounds, but everything was quiet. I told myself it was probably just the neighbors and went back to my book. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard a faint creak from the hallway. My apartment has old wooden floors and they make noises sometimes, but this was different. It sounded deliberate, like someone was trying to move quietly. I got up and slowly made my way to the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my feet. I flicked on the hallway light, half expecting to see someone standing there, but it was empty. I checked the front door. It was locked. I peeked through the peephole and saw nothing unusual. I felt a bit foolish for getting so worked up over nothing. Back in the living room, I tried to focus on my book, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. I turned on some music to break the silence, which helped a little. After a while, I decided to take a shower before bed. I went into the bathroom, locked the door out of habit, and turned on the water. The sound of the shower was comforting, drowning out the silence that had been making me so uneasy. As I was washing my hair, I thought I heard a soft knock on the bathroom door. I froze, water streaming down my face. I listened, heart pounding, but heard nothing else. I told myself it was just the pipes or the building settling, trying to stay rational. When I got out of the shower, I dried off quickly and put on my pajamas. I unlocked the bathroom door and peeked out into the hallway. Again, nothing. I walked through the apartment, checking each room, making sure all the windows were closed and locked. Everything was secure. Feeling a bit silly, I got into bed and tried to relax. I must have drifted off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to a strange noise. It sounded like a soft, shuffling sound, like someone moving around in the dark. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The noise was coming from the living room. I felt a surge of fear, but tried to stay calm. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but of course it was dead. Typical. I had left the charger in the living room. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and crept toward the door. The shuffling sound continued, slow and deliberate. My mind raced with possibilities. A burglar, a homeless person seeking shelter, maybe even a neighbor who had gotten drunk and wandered into the wrong apartment. I reached the living room and peered around the corner. My heart nearly stopped. There was a figure standing in the middle of the room, facing away from me. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could see they were holding something. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out of there, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I made it back to my bedroom and locked the door, my hands shaking. I didn't have a weapon, but I grabbed a heavy lamp from my nightstand, holding it like a club. I could hear the shuffling getting closer. Whoever it was, They were coming down the hallway. I held my breath, listening as they stopped just outside my door. The doorknob rattled softly, then stopped. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. There was a long, terrifying silence. Then, the shuffling started again, moving away from my door. I heard the front door creak open, then close. I waited, listening for any other sounds, but there was nothing. After what felt like an eternity, I finally dared to move. I unlocked my bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway. The front door was slightly ajar. I walked over and peeked outside, but there was no sign of anyone. I closed and locked the door, then checked the entire apartment again. Whoever had been there was gone. I called the police, but they didn't find much. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. They suggested it might have been someone who had a key or knew how to pick locks. They advised me to change the locks and be more vigilant. I never found out who it was or what they wanted. All I know is that someone was in my apartment watching me, and I had no idea. I still have trouble sleeping, and I keep a bat by my bed now. Living alone isn't the same anymore. Last month, I decided to take a few days off from work to catch up on some much-needed rest and relaxation. My boyfriend was out of town on a business trip, so I had the house to myself. It was a quaint, 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. Or so I thought. It was a Thursday night, and I had just finished a binge-watching session on Netflix. It was around midnight when I decided to head to bed. I did my usual routine of checking all the doors and windows to make sure they were locked. Everything seemed normal, so I turned off the lights and went upstairs to my bedroom. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but I was jolted awake by a loud bang. I sat up, heart racing, and listened intently. The house was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 2:15 a.m. I got out of bed and crept down the stairs as quietly as I could. When I reached the bottom, I noticed that the front door was slightly open. I distinctly remembered locking it before going to bed. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly, or perhaps the wind had blown it open. But there was no wind, and I knew I had locked it. I quickly closed and locked the door, then checked the rest of the house. Everything else seemed fine. I tried to convince myself it was nothing and went back upstairs to bed. I left the hallway light on this time just in case. I had just started to drift off when I heard it again. A loud bang, followed by what sounded like footsteps. My heart was pounding as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening, and they assured me that a patrol car was on its way. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher, listening as the footsteps grew louder. They were coming up the stairs. I could hear the creak of each step, slow and deliberate. I locked my bedroom door and hid in the closet, trying to keep my breathing quiet. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. The doorknob rattled, then turned. I held my breath, clutching my phone, listening as the door slowly opened. The dispatcher kept talking to me, telling me to stay calm and that help was on the way, but it felt like an eternity. I could hear someone moving around in my room, their footsteps muffled on the carpet. I peeked through the slats in the closet door and saw a shadow moving past. Whoever it was, they were tall and dressed in dark clothing. They were searching my room, opening drawers and closets. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I stayed as still as possible, barely daring to breathe. Just then I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The intruder froze for a moment, then turned and bolted out of the room. I stayed hidden until I heard the front door slam shut and the sirens getting closer. The dispatcher told me the police were outside and that it was safe to come out. I ran downstairs and opened the door, practically collapsing into the arms of the police officer. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but found no sign of the intruder. They did find evidence of forced entry. A window in the back of the house had been pried open. The police stayed with me until my boyfriend could catch a flight back home. They never did find the person who broke in, and I still have no idea what they were looking for, or why they chose my house. The thought that someone was in my home, searching through my things while I was asleep, still gives me chills. I've since installed a security system and reinforced all the locks and windows.